Hey guys, I want to do a video today and look at little season eschatology and look at it from the standpoint of why have the churches not at least considered this as an option when discussing end times interpretation. The book of Revelation, the last days events that we see throughout the Bible within biblical prophecy. In the church, we're given false dichotomies. We're not given the option of little season eschatology. And this is the end times viewpoint that we've been discussing for about a year now on my channel at length, video after video, exploring the possibility that the second coming of Jesus Christ has already occurred, as well as the 1,000-year reign that we read about in the book of Revelation, in Revelation 20, this 1,000 years, this millennial kingdom of Christ that most Christianity is looking at as something yet to occur. The little season eschatology looks at it as being in our past, and that now we're further down the prophetic timeline than what most churches teach today, and that we're in Satan's little season, this season of deception prophesied of in Revelation 20. But why have we not ever been given this option within the church? Why is it just now, within the last year or two, is that this end times viewpoint is being considered by a growing number of Christians? Well, one, I think it's never been taught in the churches before because we're in the little season of deception. And the last several generations that we know of as church teachings have been part of this little season of deception. This false dichotomy that we're given within the churches, this misinformer tactic where you're given an either-or fallacy. That's what's occurring with biblical prophecy within Christianity. This two or more options of how to interpret biblical prophecy where none of them are true. They're all false. It's a false dichotomy. And that's what we're being taught within the churches today. Do you want the red pill or the blue pill? I don't want either pill because they're both wrong. And we see this, for example, within the churches when it comes to Calvinism and Arminianism. Which view is correct? Calvinism or Arminianism? Again, this is a false dichotomy. They're both wrong. Why I am not an Arminian, why I am not a Calvinist. I'm neither, because they're both wrong. In the same sense, we're given false dichotomies within the church today when it comes to biblical prophecy. Are you a preterist or are you a futurist? You have preterists making videos about futurists and futurists making videos about preterists. Do you want the red pill of preterism or the blue pill of futurism, or vice versa, however you want to look at it? I don't want either because they're both wrong. But not only futurism or preterism, when it comes to views of the book of Revelation, there's multiple views when it comes to church teachings. You not only have preterism, futurism, but you have idealist perspective, you have historicists. You know, and what's funny is 3 of the 4 views, idealists, preterists, historicists, look at the 1,000-year period prophesied of 6 times in the book of Revelation, in Revelation 20, as being not literal. So if you look at the 1,000-year millennial kingdom as being literal, the only option you're given within the church, at least, is futurism. Again, the churches today are popping open bottles of pills and shoving it down Christians' mouths, and all these pills are false dichotomies. They're all false. They're not giving us any truth within biblical timelines. They're giving half-truths, they're giving some truths, but the big picture is not presented. And that leads to what we now have is utter confusion within Christianity when it comes to end times events, misunderstanding the end times. And it gets worse and worse. Speaking of popping pills and throwing them down Christians' mouth, if you look at the futurist viewpoint, which is false, let's subdivide it into 3 further false viewpoints. The pre, the post, the amillennial view. Which are you? Are you pre-trib rapture? Are you mid-trib? Are you post-trib? Are you pre-trib, post-wrath? You know, all these are false. But that's what we're given. These are the only options we're given within the churches today. You see the premillennial view here in this chart that is taught by many churches today, where after the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, began the church age, and almost 2,000 years later, we're still in it. And we're awaiting tribulation, the Antichrist, Armageddon, before the second coming. And when Satan's bound, then we have a future literal 1,000-year millennial reign. That's what premillennial futurism teaches. And then you see the final judgment, new heavens and new earth. You see here Satan released the battle of Gog and Magog. They put it here in this premillennial chart within the 1,000 years, but that's not correct. Satan's released after the 1,000-year period has expired, and that's when the little season begins, Satan's little season. Do you see the little season mentioned in this chart in premillennialism? No, because it's not taught in the churches. We see postmillennial viewpoint. You would think at least with postmillennial, they would consider the millennial kingdom as already having occurred, right? That's what post means. But no, not when it comes to the Christian churches today. Postmillennial doesn't mean that the 1,000-year reign of Christ has already occurred. It simply means that they're blending the church age with an arbitrary timeline of the millennial kingdom. It's an indefinite timeline and goes on from the first coming till a future second coming. And that Satan is bound during this time, but just bound from the gospel to going forward enough during the church age. And the only difference between postmillennial and amillennial view is that postmillennial view looks at the world getting better and better up until the second coming of Jesus Christ. Do you see Satan's little season within this chart on postmillennialism? No, because it's not taught. Amillennial, same thing. Do you see Satan's little season within this? No, because it's not taught. And again, they conflate the church age, which I don't like to use anyway, because we have basically the second coming of Jesus Christ. We have the time between his first coming, his death, burial, and resurrection. If you want to call that the establishment of the church, until his second coming, around between 70 and 76 AD is when that occurred. That's the time when the Revelation, trumpet, and ball judgments began. That was judgment. That was God's wrath on the earth at that time. And what followed was the millennial kingdom. So if we have a church age, we have a short church age. And then we had the millennial kingdom age. And now we're in Satan's little season. And we're the church within Satan's little season right now. But the church age isn't this almost 2,000-year period. There's been a 1,000-year millennial reign within this timeline. And this 2,000 years, time has been added to our calendar, as it says in Daniel 7:25, where times and laws have been changed. And I'll show you how that has occurred in our historical past. But again, amillennial looks at the second coming of Jesus Christ to come in our future, but things get worse and worse up until that standpoint. But they look at the time currently as being a spiritual millennial reign, where Christ reigns in our hearts and that Satan is bound at this point in time. That's what amillennial teaches. So all these teachings, futurism, preterism, historicism, idealism, the premillennial, postmillennial, amillennial, all the rapture stuff, they can't put the piece together. They have the wrong pieces. They don't have enough pieces. Sometimes they have the wrong puzzle. Like the church gives you the completely wrong puzzle. The church gives you a puzzle to put together of Nebuchadnezzar's image and gives you puzzle pieces that puts it together like this, when actually this is probably what Nebuchadnezzar's image looked like. It's a completely different puzzle. But that's what we're dealing with within the churches today. We're missing pieces. We have the wrong pieces, or we have the complete wrong puzzle. We have the wrong image of the puzzle where we can't put it together. Discerning truth in a world of deception. And again, there is so much spiritual deception. We're in the era of deception prophesied of in Revelation 20. We're in Satan's little season right now, We are in this era of deception. And there's more spiritual deception in this world than most people know or can even comprehend. And it's not only in the world, it's not only in our government, it's not only in our school and education systems, it's not only in our media and our entertainment industry, but especially within our churches. That's why we've never been given even an option, a consideration of being in Satan's little season, and this eschatology viewpoint is even being a possibility because we have been deceived. But looking at it from a truth seeker standpoint that aren't looking through it through biblical lens can also see the errors of our past. They can see the historical lies, but again, they have these pieces of the puzzle, but they can't put it together because they're not doing it from a biblical standpoint. They don't have the image of the puzzle so that they can put all these puzzle pieces that they have in their hand together. And just one of many examples of that is the study of Tartaria, this Tartarian Empire that we've been looking at in alternative history over the past several years, where you have alternative historicists looking at these grand old world buildings all over the world. You see here, for instance, Brazil, Germany, the Vatican. You see Chicago prior to that structure's destruction after the 1893 World's Fair in Chicago. But these were grand buildings that our history tells you were built at the time of horse and buggy without modern machinery and construction equipment. And it's all over the world, and it's very similar designs throughout, no matter where you go throughout the world, throughout Asia, the Americas, Europe, India. You go to Russia, you see it all. You see it here in Chicago. You see it in the Far East, in Osaka, Japan, in Seoul, Korea, Saigon, Winnipeg, Canada, Calcutta. You see it in India. You see it in the Middle East, in Tehran, in Australia, in Melbourne, in Rio, in Buenos Aires, etc., in South America. You see all these old world buildings built very similarly in same type construction, with the domes, with the cathedral, with the palaces, with the spires, Gothic, Romanesque, you name it. It's all the same all over the world. And people that have looked at these buildings from an alternative history standpoint look at it as this grand empire that once was in our past but has been hidden now. This hidden history of our past, and look at, the world is hiding Great Tartary, or the Tartarian Empire, and that this was this vast worldwide empire that built these angelic architectural structures throughout the world, and that this society at that time could harness free energy. And they speak a lot about antiquitech and hidden technology and things like that. Again, they see these pieces of the puzzle, but they don't have the image, so they can't put the puzzle piece together. They're confused, just like people within the church are confused today when it comes to end times. And again, whether you're in the secular world or in the church, listening to teachers, these experts on eschatology, teach their latest, greatest viewpoints with these great charts talking about the rapture and when it occurs and all this with their fancy diagrams, without the reference image of the puzzle, the church and the secular world aren't going to put it all together. First, you have to have biblical lens. You have to have an understanding from the Spirit through the pages of the Holy Bible. But second, you have to have the image of what ties all these things together, from biblical prophecy to our historical past that we've been lied about. And the grand image of this puzzle of biblical prophecy and what we're seeing in our past is that the millennial kingdom has already occurred. Has it already happened? Yes, it definitely has. And we see it all over the world. For instance, these cathedrals, these were power sources. This was a power source of free energy. They're built like batteries, and they have sound energy, somatics, within their structure. This is old world architecture. This is angelic architecture of the millennial reign of Christ. But we're told in our history books that this was built during the Dark Ages. Half of writing history is hiding the truth, and that's what's occurred over the last couple of centuries or so, is history has been rewritten and the truth has been hidden. The Dark Ages weren't dark. It was the age of light. This 1,000-year period that we read about in our history books, known as the Dark Ages, are known as the Byzantine Empire, which they say occurred during this 1,000 years of Dark Ages, was truly the millennial kingdom of Christ. This 1,000-year reign that we see 6 times in the book of Revelation 20, this was the time period that has been hidden. And the evidence of it is everywhere. It's not only in this angelic architecture that still exists today, even though much of it has been destroyed through world wars, has been bombed and utterly destroyed, or has been repurposed into cathedrals for false religions, or world government buildings to carry out their New World Order plans, or they were converted into museums and libraries where the false history books are placed and where the fake dinosaur bones are placed to further confuse people, to deceive people during this era of deception that we're in. But we see these famous palaces all over the world. This is evidence of a millennial reign in our past. Buckingham Palace, the Palace of Versailles with the Hall of Mirrors here, this ornate architecture, these angelic murals that we see. This is what they were seeing when this was built. They were seeing the glorified saints. They were seeing angels that ruled and reigned during this time, having access from the heavens to the earth during this 1,000-year period. There was a specific purpose for this era after the wrath of God destroyed the earth as they knew it at that time, and a new heavens and new earth were created. This was the millennial kingdom. And we see it in our Holy Bible, prophesied of, but we see it in our history books, again, as Byzantium, the Dark Ages. And it says here in this slide, why did the Byzantine Empire survive and prosper for 1,000 years? You know, we haven't seen any other empire survive this long. How did the Byzantine Empire during the Dark Ages, this time period where we have famine and plagues and war and minimal advancements in technology, how did this strong empire survive 1,000 years? And you have the experts, historicists, that say, well, it was because Constantinople was a mighty fortress that needed few soldiers to defend it so they could protect other areas instead within the empire. And the wealth of the empire supported a large army, and they paid other invaders off to move away. And that they were able to amass this wealth through their location, their accessibility, different trade routes, and that Christianity at that time was united. Well, Christianity within that time was united because it was being reigned through Jesus Christ by glorified saints. But it lasted 1,000 years because that's how long it was prophesied to last within the Bible, as we read in Revelation 27. Why did it last 1,000 years? Because it said it was going to last 1,000 years. And then it had an expiration date. And when the 1,000 years are expired, Satan shall be loosed out of his prison. It had a specific purpose, specific time to get the glorious gospel of Jesus Christ out to the world after the new heavens and new earth were created. And then after the 1,000 years expired, Satan was loosed from the bottomless pit, and that's when the little season began. And that is the era of deception that we're currently in. I think we're at the tail end of it. But again, our history books are going to lie to you and say that the Dark Ages was a period that lasted from the 5th to 15th century. This 1,000 years started in the 5th century, lasted to the 15th century, and then you had the Renaissance to end the Dark Ages. They also refer to this as the Middle Ages or medieval times. So our false history books have a false Dark Ages timeline. They have changed times and laws. Truly, the Dark Ages were the age of light, the millennial kingdom of Christ, and that happened after the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD and the events that followed, ultimately leading to the destruction of Jerusalem and fall of Rome. And then after that, in the 75, 76 AD, that is when the millennial kingdom began. But our Dark Ages timeline is going to push that several hundred years forward and say that, no, the Dark Ages started in the 5th century. Again, adding time to our chronology, and that's what they do. That's one of the many ways they confuse. They add time to our chronology. They've done that in our past. They've rewritten history. They've lied about our history, and they've conflated real people, real places, real events, and put it within a longer time period so that you're confused. And let me show you, for instance, history is a set of lies agreed upon. Napoleon Bonaparte, he led the French Revolution. They went into Europe and into Asia and Russia and destroyed buildings and destroyed literature and books and killed millions of people. The same time, George Washington was leading the American Revolution, which was doing the same thing in the West. So truly, this wasn't George Washington leading the American Revolution in the West and Napoleon Bonaparte leading the French Revolution in the East. This was these two Antichrist figures, these Freemasons, carrying out a Luciferian New World agenda. They were carrying out a Luciferian revolution that began and kicked off the little season. But getting back to our Dark Ages timeline that we're given, 536 AD, the worst year in human history. So this is right at the start of our Dark Ages timeline that our false history books give us. What happened in 536 AD at the time where the fall of Rome had come to a completion? Well, it says here, you probably think that 2020 is the worst year, but it turns out it's not. Historians have unanimously crowned 536 AD as the worst year ever due to dense fog that plunged most of the world into darkness for 2 years, and this resulted in the coldest decade in 2,000 years. It was accompanied by the bubonic plague, which killed 100 million people. And this period was sparked by an Icelandic volcanic eruption in 536 AD. I bet fire and brimstone came from the heavens to earth during this large volcanic eruption, don't you think? And a copious spread of ash worldwide was the rule. But when the world tells you that these events happened in 536 AD, no, this happened several years earlier, several hundred years earlier, prior to the millennial kingdom of Christ, at the time of the trumpet and vial judgments in the book of Revelation. What the worst year in history is describing in 536 AD in our history books is the book of Revelation and the 7 vials being poured out upon the earth where the kingdoms fell Jerusalem was destroyed, split into 3 parts, and the Roman Empire fell at that time. This was the wrath of God that 536 AD is describing in our history books. The Dark Ages, the chronicle of the plague, the bubonic plague occurred at this time. This plague of infectious diseases that spread among a large population of people were not uncommon in the Middle Ages. Plagues had broken out before in East Asia and spread to Europe and North Africa, but they usually subsided. That's what our history books is going to tell us. But the truth is that the bubonic plague that occurred at that time was the first vial judgment in the trumpet vial judgments in the book of Revelation. In Revelation 16:2, and the first went, speaking of the first angel, and poured out his vial upon the earth, and there fell a noisome and grievous sore upon the men which had the mark of the beast, and upon them which worshipped his image. This is the bubonic plague that we see in Revelation 16:2. Our history books put it in a different era, several hundred centuries after the event. Also, in 536, the worst year in our history, a fog arrived and smothered Europe and the Middle East in complete darkness. Just like the ash and the coldness that resulted because of the volcanic eruptions and the ash and the smog and the fog and the smoke. But this is simply describing the 5th trumpet that we see in the book of Revelation. We read Revelation 9:1-3, and the 5th angel sounded, and I saw a star fall from heaven into the earth, and to him was given the key of the bottomless pit, and he opened the bottomless pit, and there arose a smoke out of the pit, as the smoke of a great furnace, and the sun and the air were darkened by reason of the smoke of the pit. And there came out of the smoke locusts upon the earth, and unto them was given power as the scorpions of the earth have power. And this is a pictorial depiction of the 5th trumpet judgment that we see in Revelation 9. This really happened. And our history books tell you it happened in 536 AD, but it happened several hundred years earlier at the time of God's wrath being poured out against Jerusalem and the Roman Empire and the kingdoms of the world. And even the 5th trumpet with the scorpion light beams that sting mankind for 5 months. I mean, I think this really happened. I mean, this isn't hyperbole. This isn't figurative. This is actually what happened. Now, these people probably didn't see this. You know, these are spiritual beings that John saw in a vision. Just like Elisha could see the angelic army that outnumbered the human army that they were about to battle. You know, and God opened his eyes and servant's eyes so he could see it. You know, same thing here. You know, John was allowed to see this vision of something that's veiled that mortal man can't see. But this is what they look like. I'm sure of it. You know, it's real. Revelation is not what they told you. You know, the book of Revelation, with the futurists, the preterists, the idealists, the historist views that we're seeing, that we have seen for generation after generation in the churches today, it's not what they told you. We're further down the prophetic timeline than what the Christianity teaches. You know, most of Christianity teaches that we are in the church age. In fact, they all do. It's that the preterist view. And they spiritualize everything that occurs when it comes to the millennial kingdom and afterwards. You know, again, most people are looking at the second coming, the futurists, and within that, the premillennial, the postmillennial, the amillennial. They're all looking at a future second coming, and that we're somewhere in the church age right here. And then follow that, you have the 1,000-year reign. Follow that by the great white throne judgment, and then the new heaven and new earth. What do you not see here? Again, you don't see Satan's little season. It's not taught in the churches. This viewpoint has never been truly taught in the churches. It's not taught anywhere. It's not there. But this is where we are. We're further down the prophetic timeline. We're right at this point before the great white throne judgment. There's still things to come. There's still, if we are indeed in Satan's little season, the next big event to come is the nation's armies surrounding the camp of the saints in the beloved city, and then fire coming down from God, from heaven, to destroy them all. And this is followed by New Jerusalem descending, a new heaven, new earth being established, the first heaven, first earth fleeing away. And you have, after the great white throne judgment and all that occurs in Revelation 21, you have the resurrection at the last day. So a lot to look forward to in Satan's little season. A new age is dawning, a new earth, while we're still living in Satan's little season. There's no doubt about it that we're in this time period, because this end times viewpoint puts the puzzle pieces together better than any other eschatology viewpoint I've ever been taught or studied, by far. There's so many missing pieces. There's so many wrong puzzle pieces, or you're putting the wrong puzzle all together when you are looking at the church's teachings today. And certainly without reading the Bible and looking at our historical past through a biblical lens, you're not going to be able to see all the evidence that is out there in the secular world today. This puts these pieces, all these confusing puzzle pieces, if you don't have the big image of where we are and who we are, if you don't have that, you're not going to be able to put all this together. And this is what this little season eschatology does. It allows you to put biblical prophecy together that makes sense, that puts our historical past together that makes sense, and everything within it. All these separate pieces that look so confusing without this biblical perspective. Once you get it, then the light bulb comes on and you begin to understand. But like I said on Paul's channel, Understanding Conspiracy, in chat room the other day, this little season eschatology is still in its infancy. We're just now beginning to touch the surface on learning about all the things within this end times viewpoint. And I think that more and more will be revealed as more people begin to discern this, to understand this, to pray for knowledge, wisdom, and understanding on biblical prophecy, on end times, seeking, looking for truth, and being a Berean and seeing these things are true. And as we've gone down this road for the past year almost, we're just connecting more and more dots. It becomes less confusing by the day. It's putting the puzzle together, unlike any other viewpoint ever studied, in my opinion. It's just linking it together, and ultimately, one day we hope to have enough pieces to where we can answer every question that's proposed. Again, we are still studying this end times perspective. We're still learning. We're still looking at all the events of Revelation and how that ties into the little season that we're in, looking at our past. And as this continues, I think we're going to, again, connect more dots, put more puzzle pieces together, be able to answer a lot of questions that are being proposed about the end times. So tell your friends that we're living in Satan's little season, and show them biblical proof. Show them the dozens of passages supporting the second coming of Jesus Christ having already occurred, and that the millennial kingdom has already occurred, and now we're in this era of deception. Show them historical alternative history and the truths within that our world will lie to you about. Show them the truth, tie it all together for them, help them. Again, telling others, especially within the church, who have been taught one thing their whole lives, that are waiting on the rapture, and you tell them this viewpoint, they're going to have a visceral reaction. It's either going to be denial, anger. It's going to be one of those early stages of grief. You're going to go into cognitive dissonance. you've been taught and have something ingrained in your belief system for so long. If something opposes that and comes against that, you can't even process it. And that's where a lot of people within Christianity are today. You tell them, the second coming of Jesus Christ has already occurred, and so has the millennial kingdom, and we're further down the biblical prophecy timeline than what the church teaches, and that we're in the season of deception. Their head's gonna spin if they're not ready for it. So be patient, because again, they could be going through the 5 stages of grief of their long held belief system in their end times viewpoint that their beloved pastor has taught them for 50 years, and something goes against that. You're going to get this early phase of grief. You're going to get anger, denial, depression, and everything else that goes along with it. So be patient with these people. Be patient with the ones who are angry, the ones that are in denial, the ones that come back at you. Show them grace, show them kindness. We've all been there before. I've been deceived by the futurist viewpoint. I used to make videos trying to look at biblical prophecy from a futurist standpoint. I was deceived just like everybody else. When I'm sharing this end times viewpoint of the little season with others, I almost look at it like, okay, just think that person was you 7 or 8 years ago, or even just a few years ago, and be patient with them, be kind, show them grace. If they come again, that's cool. We should never, as Christians, as believers, as brethren, split about end times viewpoints. That should never be a divisive standpoint where you cut off fellowship in the first place. So we all, whether you agree with this or not, whether you're in the early phase of learning about this or where you are very mature in your beliefs on this and have studied it out, regardless, you should be kind, considerate to others and where they are at that time in learning truth and seeking truth in all things. So be a light of the world in Satan's little season. Give them the good news of Jesus Christ. Be patient, be kind, be loving as you tell them if they ask, if they want to know more, if they ask if they have questions about end times, if they're confused about things, if they've heard this viewpoint and want to know your perspective on it. Again, in a gracious, loving, kind way, give them evidence that we're indeed in the little seasons. Show them all the scriptures. Show them the evidence of our historical past and how it all ties in together. Show them this deception that we're in during this time. Because I would be confident in saying that most people understand that this world is deceived right now, that there is this world is in utter disarray right now, and it's only getting worse. We're not post-millennial. Things aren't going to get better. Things are only going to get worse and worse during the deception that we're in right now. So have your biblical glasses on. Be patient with others and spread the good news of Jesus Christ.